Sarah Martinez had always been different from the other girls in her small Texas town. While they spent their teenage years shopping at the mall and gossiping about boys, she was reading military history books and dreaming of serving her country. Her father, a Vietnam veteran who died when she was 12, had filled her childhood with stories of honor, sacrifice, and the brotherhood of soldiers. Those stories became her compass, guiding her toward a future that seemed impossible for a girl from a town where women were expected to become teachers, nurses, or mothers. At 18, Sarah enlisted in the army, much to her mother's horror and the town's collective shock. Maria Martinez had hoped her daughter would follow a more traditional path, perhaps becoming a teacher like herself or marrying young and raising a family. But Sarah's mind was made up. She wanted to serve, to honor her father's memory, and to prove that women could be just as dedicated to their country as men. Basic training at Fort Benning was brutal. Sarah faced challenges she had never imagined, from the physical demands of military life to the skepticism of her male counterparts who questioned whether women belonged in combat roles. Some drill sergeants pushed her harder than the men, testing her resolve at every turn. Others seemed to expect her to quit, making snide comments about how she should be home taking care of babies instead of playing soldier. But Sarah persevered. She excelled in marksmanship, tactical training, and leadership exercises. Her fellow recruits gradually began to respect her dedication and skill, though some remained convinced that women were fundamentally unsuited for military service. Sarah ignored the doubters and focused on her goal, becoming the best soldier she could be. After completing basic training and advanced individual training as a combat medic, Sarah was deployed to Afghanistan. The reality of war hit her immediately. The base was a constant buzz of activity, with helicopters coming and going, soldiers preparing for missions, and the ever-present tension that came with knowing that danger lurked beyond the wire. Sarah was assigned to a forward operating base in Helmand Province, one of the most dangerous regions in the country. Her first few months overseas were a learning experience unlike anything she had encountered. Sarah treated wounded soldiers, both American and Afghan, learning to work under pressure and make life-or-death decisions in seconds. She earned the respect of her unit through her competence and calm demeanor under fire, but she also faced ongoing challenges from some soldiers who still believed women had no place in combat zones. The incident that would change her life forever happened on a scorching July afternoon. Sarah's unit was called to assist with a medical emergency at a remote outpost that had been hit by an improvised explosive device. As their convoy approached the site, they were ambushed by Taliban fighters who had been waiting in the hills surrounding the road. The attack was swift and devastating. Rocket-propelled grenades exploded around their vehicles, filling the air with smoke and debris. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions, and Sarah could hear the distinctive crack of bullets passing close to her head. Their lead vehicle was disabled by an explosion, and 3 soldiers were seriously wounded. Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed her medical bag and ran toward the damaged vehicle under heavy fire. Her training kicked in as she assessed the wounded soldiers and began providing emergency medical care. One soldier had shrapnel embedded in his chest and was losing blood rapidly. Another had a severe leg injury that threatened to be fatal if not treated immediately. The third was unconscious with what appeared to be a traumatic brain injury. While treating the wounded, Sarah coordinated with her unit to establish a defensive perimeter and call for air support. She worked methodically, applying tourniquets, administering pain medication, and stabilizing the injured soldiers while bullets flew around her. Her calm voice over the radio helped coordinate the medical evacuation that would ultimately save all 3 men. The battle lasted for over 2 hours. When air support finally arrived and drove off the attackers, Sarah had successfully kept all 3 wounded soldiers alive despite the ongoing firefight. Her actions that day earned her the Bronze Star with Valor, one of the military's highest awards for heroism in combat. But, for Sarah, the recognition was secondary to the satisfaction of knowing she had saved lives and proven herself under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. The 3 soldiers she had treated made full recoveries and never forgot the medic who had risked her life to save theirs. Word of Sarah's heroism spread throughout the military community. She became something of a legend among combat medics and was frequently requested for dangerous missions because of her reputation for remaining calm under pressure. Sarah took pride in her work and in the trust her fellow soldiers placed in her abilities. After her deployment ended, Sarah was promoted to sergeant and assigned to train new combat medics. She threw herself into the role, determined to prepare the next generation of soldiers for the realities of combat. Her training methods were demanding but effective, and her students consistently performed well in both training exercises and real-world deployments. It was during this period that Sarah decided to get a tattoo to commemorate her service and the soldiers she had served alongside. She had been thinking about it for months, wanting something that would honor her father's military service as well as her own experiences in Afghanistan. After careful consideration, she chose a design that incorporated several meaningful elements. The centerpiece of the tattoo was an eagle, representing the United States and her pride in serving her country. Surrounding the eagle were symbols representing different branches of the military, acknowledging the joint nature of modern military operations and the fact that she had worked alongside Marines, Navy personnel, and Air Force members during her deployment. But the most significant element of the tattoo was a small emblem that Sarah had seen during her deployment. It was a special operations insignia that she had noticed on the uniform of a soldier who had visited their base during a particularly dangerous mission. The emblem represented an elite unit known for their courage and sacrifice, and Sarah included it in her tattoo as a tribute to all the special operations personnel she had encountered during her service. Sarah chose to have the tattoo placed on her shoulder, where it would normally be covered by her uniform but could be visible when wearing civilian clothes or workout gear. The tattoo artist was impressed by the detailed design and the obvious thought Sarah had put into each element. The finished product was a beautiful and meaningful piece of art that Sarah wore with pride. After completing the tattoo, Sarah returned to her duties with renewed enthusiasm. She continued training new medics, sharing her knowledge and experience with soldiers who would soon face the same challenges she had overcome. Her reputation as both a skilled medic and an effective trainer grew, and she was eventually selected for promotion to staff sergeant. Sarah's new assignment took her to Fort Bragg in North Carolina, home to many of the Army's elite units. The base was massive and bustling with activity, from routine training exercises to preparations for classified missions around the world. Sarah was assigned to the medical training facility, where she would be responsible for training combat medics who would support special operations forces. The work was challenging and rewarding. Sarah's students were among the most motivated and capable soldiers she had ever worked with, destined for assignments with Rangers, Special Forces, and other elite units. She pushed them hard, knowing that their lives and the lives of the soldiers they would treat depended on their mastery of combat medical techniques. It was at Fort Bragg that Sarah first encountered the culture clash that would soon test her resolve in ways she had never imagined. While most soldiers on the base respected her expertise and experience, there was an undercurrent of skepticism about women in combat roles that was more pronounced than she had experienced elsewhere. Some of this skepticism came from older soldiers who had grown up in an era when women were excluded from combat positions. They struggled to accept that women could be as effective as men in dangerous situations, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. Others came from younger soldiers who had been influenced by stereotypes about female capabilities and questioned whether women could handle the physical and emotional demands of combat. Sarah tried to address these concerns through her teaching and example, demonstrating her expertise and professionalism in every interaction. She knew that changing minds would take time and that her actions would speak louder than any words she could offer. But she also recognized that some soldiers might never fully accept women as equals in the military, regardless of their qualifications or accomplishments. The tension came to a head during a particularly challenging training exercise. Sarah was leading a group of combat medic students through a simulated mass casualty event when one of the students, a young soldier named Jackson, began questioning her instructions in front of the entire class. Jackson had been a problem student from the beginning, frequently challenging Sarah's authority and making comments about women not belonging in combat roles. He was technically competent but had an attitude problem that Sarah had been working to address through counseling and additional training. During the exercise, Jackson openly disagreed with Sarah's medical assessment of a simulated patient and suggested that her judgment was compromised because she was a woman. The comment was inappropriate and undermined Sarah's authority as an instructor, but she handled it professionally, correcting Jackson's assessment and explaining the proper medical procedures. After the exercise, Sarah called Jackson aside for a private conversation about his behavior. She explained that his comments were unacceptable and that questioning an instructor's competence based on gender was both unprofessional and counterproductive. Jackson seemed to listen, but Sarah could tell that he remained unconvinced about women's role in the military. The incident with Jackson was just one example of the challenges Sarah faced as a female soldier in a male-dominated environment. While most of her colleagues treated her with respect and professionalism, there were always a few who questioned her abilities or made inappropriate comments about her appearance or role. Sarah had developed thick skin over the years and had learned to focus on her mission rather than the opinions of others. She knew that her record spoke for itself and that the soldiers she had trained and served with recognized her competence and dedication. But the constant need to prove herself was exhausting, and sometimes she wondered if things would ever truly change. Despite these challenges, Sarah continued to excel in her role as an instructor and mentor. Her students consistently performed well in their assignments, and many sought her advice on both professional and personal matters. She had become a role model for other female soldiers and a respected member of the Fort Bragg community. Sarah's reputation eventually caught the attention of higher-ranking officers who were looking for experienced instructors to develop new training programs. She was selected to participate in a special project aimed at improving combat medical training for Special Operations Forces, an assignment that would put her in contact with some of the most elite soldiers in the military. The project was exciting and challenging, requiring Sarah to work closely with representatives from various special operations units to develop training scenarios that would prepare medics for the unique demands of special operations missions. She thrived in this environment, drawing on her combat experience and teaching expertise to create innovative training programs. It was during this project that Sarah's tattoo would become the center of a controversy that would test everything she had worked for and believed in. But, for now, she was focused on her work and proud of the progress she was making in her career. She had proven herself time and again, and she was confident that her dedication and competence would continue to open doors and create opportunities. As Sarah settled into her new role, she had no idea that a simple tattoo she wore with pride would soon become the source of the greatest challenge of her military career. The emblem she had chosen to honor special operations personnel would be seen by some as an insult rather than a tribute, leading to a confrontation that would force her to defend not only her actions but her entire identity as a soldier. The morning that would change everything started like any other at Fort Bragg. Sarah arrived at the medical training facility early, as was her habit, to prepare for the day's lessons. She enjoyed these quiet moments before the chaos began, when she could review her training plans and mentally prepare for the challenges ahead. The autumn air was crisp and clean, carrying the sounds of soldiers beginning their morning physical training routines across the base. Sarah was wearing her standard Army physical training uniform, which left her shoulder tattoo partially visible. She had never given much thought to this, as tattoos were common among soldiers and generally accepted as long as they met military regulations. Her tattoo was meaningful to her, and she wore it with the same pride she felt in wearing her uniform. The first indication that something was wrong came during the morning formation. As Sarah stood with her fellow instructors, she noticed several soldiers glancing at her shoulder and whispering among themselves. At first, she assumed they were discussing some unrelated matter, but, as the whispers continued and more eyes turned in her direction, she began to feel uncomfortable. After formation, Sergeant First Class Roberts, one of the senior instructors, approached Sarah with a concerned expression. Roberts was a good soldier and had always treated Sarah with respect, so his serious demeanor immediately caught her attention. "Martinez, we need to talk," Roberts said quietly, glancing around to make sure they wouldn't be overheard. "There's been some chatter about your tattoo. Nothing official yet, but you should be aware that some people are asking questions." Sarah was puzzled by the comment. Her tattoo met all Army regulations regarding size, placement, and content. She had checked the regulations carefully before getting it and had even consulted with her first sergeant to make sure there would be no issues. "What kind of questions?" Sarah asked, genuinely confused. "The tattoo is completely within regulations. I made sure of that before I got it." Roberts looked uncomfortable, as if he was struggling with how to explain the situation. "It's not about the regulations, Martinez.
It's about one of the emblems in the design.
Some of the special operations guys have seen it and they're not happy.
They're saying you're wearing insignia you didn't earn.
The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had included the special operations emblem in her tattoo as a tribute, a way of honoring the courage and sacrifice of the elite soldiers she had encountered during her deployment. The thought that anyone would interpret it as her claiming to have earned something she hadn't never occurred to her. "That's not what I intended at all," Sarah said, her voice rising slightly before she caught herself and lowered it again.
It was meant as a tribute, a way of showing respect for special operations personnel.
I would never claim to have earned something I didn't.
Roberts nodded sympathetically.
I believe you, and I think anyone who knows you would believe you. But the problem is that some of these guys don't know you, and they're making assumptions based on what they see.
Word is spreading, and it's not good. As the day progressed, Sarah became increasingly aware of the negative attention her tattoo was attracting.
Soldiers she didn't know were pointing at her and talking in hushed tones. Some of the looks she received were openly hostile, while others seemed more curious than angry. But all of the attention was unwelcome and made her feel like she was under constant scrutiny. During her first class of the day, Sarah noticed that several of her students were distracted and kept glancing at her shoulder. The lesson, which should have been focused on advanced trauma care techniques, felt stilted and awkward.
Students who normally asked thoughtful questions seemed hesitant to engage, and the usual energy and enthusiasm were noticeably absent.
After dismissing the class, Sarah was approached by one of her better students, a young soldier named Thompson who had always been respectful and professional. He looked nervous as he approached, clearly struggling with whether to speak up about something.
"Sergeant Martinez," Thompson began hesitantly, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but some of the guys have been talking about your tattoo. They're saying you're wearing a SEAL trident that you didn't earn.
I told them that couldn't be right, that you would never do something like that, but they insisted." Sarah felt her heart sink as she realized the magnitude of the misunderstanding. The emblem in her tattoo wasn't a SEAL trident, but it was similar enough that someone who saw it briefly might mistake it for one. The SEAL trident was one of the most respected and jealously guarded symbols in the military, representing years of grueling training and proven courage in the most dangerous situations imaginable. For someone to wear a SEAL trident they hadn't earned was considered one of the most serious breaches of military honor and tradition. It was equivalent to claiming to be a Medal of Honor recipient or a member of any other elite group without having done the work to earn that distinction. "Thompson, I need to be very clear about this," Sarah said, choosing her words carefully. "I am not a Navy SEAL, and I have never claimed to be one. The emblem in my tattoo is not a SEAL trident, though I can understand why someone might mistake it for one. It was meant as a tribute to all special operations personnel, not a claim that I belong to any particular unit." Thompson looked relieved by her explanation, but Sarah could tell that the damage might already be done. Once rumors started spreading in the military, they could take on a life of their own, growing more distorted with each retelling. The situation deteriorated rapidly over the next few hours. By lunchtime, the story had spread throughout the medical training facility and beyond. Sarah could feel the weight of suspicious stares wherever she went, and several soldiers made pointed comments about wannabes and phonies within earshot of her. The most painful part was watching the reactions of soldiers she had trained and mentored. Some seemed confused and hurt, as if they felt betrayed by someone they had looked up to.
Others appeared angry, as if Sarah had somehow dishonored them personally by her perceived deception.
Sarah tried to go about her duties normally, but the hostile atmosphere was making it increasingly difficult to function effectively. During her afternoon class, a student openly challenged her authority, questioning whether someone who would steal valor from real warriors had any business teaching combat medicine. The comment was clearly designed to provoke a reaction, and Sarah had to draw on all her self-control to respond professionally. She corrected the student's behavior and continued with the lesson, but she could feel her confidence and authority being undermined with each passing hour. As word of the controversy spread, Sarah began receiving messages from friends and colleagues expressing their support and disbelief at the accusations. Many of them knew her well enough to understand that she would never intentionally dishonor military traditions or claim achievements she hadn't earned. But their support, while appreciated, couldn't stop the spread of negative rumors.
The situation reached a critical point when Sarah was summoned to see her company commander, Captain Williams. Williams was a fair and experienced officer who had always treated Sarah with respect, but his expression was serious as she entered his office. "Sergeant Martinez, please have a seat," Williams said formally. "I'm sure you're aware of the concerns that have been raised about your tattoo. I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with here before this gets any further out of hand." Sarah explained the entire situation to Captain Williams, from her motivation for getting the tattoo to her choice of design elements. She emphasized that she had never intended to claim membership in any special operations unit and that the emblem in question was not actually a seal trident, despite the superficial similarity. Captain Williams listened carefully to her explanation, occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific details. He seemed genuinely interested in understanding her perspective and getting to the truth of the matter. "I believe you, Martinez," Williams said after she finished her explanation. "But the problem is perception. A lot of people have seen that tattoo and drawn conclusions about what it means. Some very influential people are asking questions, and I need to be able to give them answers." Williams explained that several senior non-commissioned officers from special operations units had contacted his superiors about the matter. They were demanding an investigation into Sarah's background and questioning whether disciplinary action was warranted. "The thing is, Martinez, these guys take their traditions and symbols very seriously. They've earned the right to be protective of them. Even if your intentions were good, they see someone wearing what looks like their insignia, and they react accordingly." Sarah understood the concern, but she also felt frustrated by the assumption of guilt that seemed to permeate the entire situation. She had served honorably for years, earned decorations for valor in combat, and dedicated herself to training the next generation of combat medics. Yet now she was being judged based on a misunderstanding about a tattoo. "Sir, what can I do to resolve this?" Sarah asked. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to clear up this misunderstanding and restore my reputation." Williams considered her question carefully before responding. "The best thing you can do right now is be completely transparent about everything. We may need to bring in some experts to examine your tattoo and verify that it's not actually a seal trident or any other specific unit insignia. We'll also need to document your entire military service record to show that you've never made any false claims about special operations experience." As Sarah left Williams' office, she felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. She was relieved that her commanding officer seemed to believe her explanation, but anxious about the formal investigation that was apparently necessary to resolve the matter. She had never been under this kind of scrutiny before, and the experience was both humbling and frightening. The rest of the day passed in a blur of whispered conversations and suspicious glances. Sarah tried to maintain her professional demeanor, but she could feel the stress of the situation wearing on her. She had always prided herself on her reputation and integrity, and seeing both called into question was deeply painful. That evening, Sarah called her mother to talk about the situation. Maria Martinez was shocked by the story and immediately offered to drive up from Texas to provide support. But Sarah declined the offer, knowing that she needed to handle this situation herself. "Mija, you have always been honest and honorable," her mother said over the phone. "Anyone who knows you would never believe these terrible things they're saying. You just need to be strong and let the truth come out." Her mother's words provided some comfort, but Sarah knew that the truth alone might not be enough to repair the damage to her reputation. In the military, perception could be as important as reality, and the perception that she had dishonored military traditions could follow her for the rest of her career. As she lay in bed that night, Sarah thought about her father and the stories he had told her about military honor and integrity. She wondered what he would think about her current situation and whether he would be disappointed in her choices. She had always tried to live up to his example and the values he had instilled in her, but now she was facing questions about her own honor and integrity. The next morning brought new challenges as word of the controversy continued to spread. Sarah discovered that the story had reached social media, where it was being discussed and debated by people who had never met her and knew nothing about her service record or character. Some of the online comments were supportive, coming from people who argued that intentions mattered more than appearances, and
that Sarah's service record should speak for itself. But others were harshly critical, with some people calling her a fake and demanding that she be punished for stolen valor. The online attention added a new dimension to the controversy and made Sarah realize that this was no longer just a military matter. The story had taken on a life of its own and was being shaped by people who had their own agendas and prejudices. As Sarah prepared for another day of classes and meetings, she steeled herself for whatever challenges lay ahead. She was determined to clear her name and restore her reputation, but she was beginning to understand that doing so might require more than just explaining her intentions. She would need to prove her honor and integrity in ways she had never imagined, and she wasn't sure she was prepared for what that might entail. The formal investigation began 3 days after the controversy erupted. Captain Williams had explained that the inquiry was necessary to address the concerns raised by senior special operations personnel and to protect both Sarah's reputation and the integrity of military traditions. Sarah understood the necessity, but the process felt like a trial where she had to prove her innocence rather than others proving her guilt. The investigating officer was Major Patricia Coleman, a military police officer with extensive experience in handling sensitive cases involving military personnel. Coleman was professional but thorough, and she made it clear from the beginning that she would follow the evidence wherever it led, regardless of personal feelings or external pressure. Sergeant Martinez, Coleman began during their first formal interview. "I want you to understand that this investigation is not about judging your character or your service record, which I've reviewed and found exemplary. This is about determining the facts regarding your tattoo and whether any military regulations or traditions have been violated." Sarah appreciated Coleman's straightforward approach, but she still felt anxious about the process. She had never been the subject of a formal military investigation, and the experience was intimidating despite Coleman's professional demeanor. The investigation involved several components. First, Coleman arranged for a detailed photographic documentation of Sarah's tattoo by a military photographer. The images would be analyzed by experts from various special operations units to determine whether the emblem in question actually resembled any specific unit insignia closely enough to constitute a violation. Second, Coleman conducted extensive interviews with Sarah about her military service, her deployment to Afghanistan, and her motivation for getting the tattoo. These conversations were recorded and would become part of the official record. Third, Coleman reached out to soldiers who had served with Sarah in Afghanistan to verify her accounts of her deployment and to gather character references. This process was particularly important because Sarah's reputation among her former colleagues could provide crucial context for understanding her intentions. During one of their interviews, Coleman asked Sarah to describe in detail the special operations emblem that had inspired the element in her tattoo. Sarah explained that she had seen it on the uniform of a soldier who had visited their forward operating base during a particularly dangerous mission. "I remember the visit clearly because it was unusual to have special operations personnel at our location," Sarah explained. "This soldier was part of a team that was conducting operations in our area, and they needed medical support for one of their missions. I was impressed by their professionalism and dedication, and I wanted to honor that in my tattoo." Coleman made careful notes of Sarah's description and promised to investigate whether such a visit had actually occurred. This verification would be crucial in establishing the credibility of Sarah's account. Meanwhile, the controversy continued to affect Sarah's daily life and work. Some of her students remained supportive, but others seemed uncertain about her credibility as an instructor. The tension in her classes was palpable, and Sarah found herself working twice as hard to maintain the same level of effectiveness she had achieved before the controversy began. The most difficult part was dealing with the reactions of fellow instructors and other soldiers on the base. While many remained professional in their interactions with Sarah, she could sense the underlying skepticism and judgment. Conversations would stop when she entered rooms, and she often felt like she was being discussed behind her back. One particularly painful incident occurred in the dining facility when Sarah overheard a group of soldiers discussing her case. They were speculating about her motivations and questioning whether she was the type of person who would lie about her military experiences for personal gain. "I heard she's got multiple emblems on that tattoo," one soldier was saying. "Probably thinks she's some kind of super soldier or something. These wannabes are all the same."
Another soldier disagreed. "I've heard good things about her training program. Maybe there's more to the story than we're hearing."
The conversation continued with various opinions being expressed, but Sarah couldn't bear to listen anymore. She left the dining facility without finishing her meal, feeling sick to her stomach about how her reputation was being dissected by people who knew nothing about her service or character. The online discussion of her case had also intensified, with various military forums and social media groups debating the merits of her explanation. Some retired special operations personnel had weighed in, with most expressing skepticism about her story while others called for patience until all the facts were known. One particularly influential voice in the online discussion was a retired Navy SEAL who went by the handle Frogman_Chief. He had posted a lengthy analysis of the situation, arguing that Sarah's explanation was plausible but that her judgment in choosing the tattoo design was questionable. Even if her intentions were good, any soldier should know better than to get a tattoo that could be mistaken for specialized insignia, Frogman_Chief had written. It shows poor judgment at best and intentional deception at worst. Either way, it reflects badly on her fitness for leadership positions. Sarah read these online discussions despite knowing they would upset her. She felt compelled to understand how the military community was perceiving her situation, even though the comments often hurt deeply. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Major Coleman discovered evidence supporting Sarah's account of the Special Operations visit to her forward operating base. Military records confirmed that a Special Operations team had indeed requested medical support in Sarah's area during the timeframe she had described. Furthermore, Coleman was able to identify the specific emblem that Sarah had seen and described. It belonged to a joint Special Operations unit that conducted classified missions throughout Afghanistan. The emblem was not a standard SEAL trident, but it did share some visual similarities that could explain the confusion. "This is a significant development," Coleman told Sarah during one of their interviews. "It corroborates your account and provides a reasonable explanation for how you encountered this particular emblem. It also confirms that the emblem in your tattoo is not actually a SEAL trident or any other specific unit insignia that would constitute stolen valor." Sarah felt a wave of relief at this news, but Coleman cautioned her that the investigation was not yet complete. There were still questions to be answered about whether Sarah's use of the emblem, even as a tribute, was appropriate given military customs and traditions. The breakthrough in the investigation came when Coleman tracked down the Special Operations soldier who had visited Sarah's base in Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres was now stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and he agreed to participate in the investigation via video conference. Torres's testimony was crucial to Sarah's case. He confirmed that his team had indeed visited Sarah's forward operating base and that she had provided medical support for their mission. He also verified that the emblem Sarah had described was accurate and that she would have had multiple opportunities to observe it during their visit. "Sergeant Martinez was professional and competent throughout our interaction," Torres told Coleman. "She treated our wounded with skill and compassion, and she never asked inappropriate questions about our unit or mission. If she included our emblem in a tribute tattoo, I would consider that an honor, not an insult." Torres's statement carried significant weight because of his status as an active Special Operations soldier. His positive assessment of Sarah and his interpretation of her tattoo as tribute rather than theft helped shift the narrative in her favor. However, not all Special Operations personnel shared Torres's view. Several retired SEALs contacted Major Coleman to express their continued concern about the precedent Sarah's case might set. They argued that allowing soldiers to use Special Operations emblems in tattoos, even as tributes, could lead to confusion and dilute the meaning of these symbols. "The problem is that once you open this door, where does it end?" asked one retired SEAL who requested anonymity. "Today it's a tribute tattoo, tomorrow it's someone claiming to have served with units they never belonged to. These symbols mean something, and they need to be protected." Coleman found herself caught between competing perspectives on military tradition and the specific facts of Sarah's case. While the evidence supported Sarah's account and showed that she had not intentionally engaged in stolen valor, the broader questions about appropriate use of military symbols remained contentious. As the investigation continued, Sarah received an unexpected source of support from her former patients in Afghanistan. Word had somehow reached 3 soldiers whose lives she had saved during the ambush, and they reached out to express their support for her. The first to contact her was Corporal James Mitchell, who had suffered severe shrapnel wounds during the ambush. Mitchell called Sarah directly to express his outrage at the accusations against her. "Doc, this is bullshit and everyone knows it," Mitchell said, using the nickname soldiers had given her during deployment. "You saved my life and the lives of 2 other guys under fire. Anyone questioning your honor or integrity doesn't know what they're talking about." Similar messages came from the other 2 soldiers she had treated that day. Their support meant more to Sarah than any official finding could, because they had seen her character tested under the most extreme circumstances imaginable. Mitchell also provided Major Coleman with a detailed account of Sarah's actions during the ambush, emphasizing her courage, competence, and dedication to her fellow soldiers. His testimony added another layer of context to Sarah's character and service record. "She didn't hesitate for a second when we got hit," Mitchell told Coleman. "While everyone else was taking cover, she was running toward the gunfire to help us. That's not the kind of person who would dishonor military traditions for personal gain." The investigation also uncovered evidence of Sarah's ongoing commitment to military values and traditions. Coleman interviewed several of her former students, who described her as someone who consistently emphasized honor, integrity, and respect for military history and traditions in her teaching. "Sergeant Martinez always talked about the importance of earning your place in the military community," said one student. She would tell stories about different units and their traditions, always emphasizing that respect had to be earned, not claimed. "The idea that she would violate those principles doesn't match anything I've seen from her." As the investigation neared its conclusion, Sarah tried to prepare herself for whatever findings Major Coleman would present. She had cooperated fully with the process and provided all the information and documentation requested. She had also endured weeks of scrutiny, gossip, and online criticism while continuing to perform her duties as effectively as possible. The strain was beginning to show, however. Sarah had lost weight and was having difficulty sleeping. The constant stress of being under investigation while trying to maintain her professional responsibilities was taking a toll on her physical and mental health. Her mother had noticed the changes during their weekly phone calls and had again offered to visit. This time, Sarah accepted the offer, realizing that she needed the support of family during this difficult period. Maria Martinez arrived at Fort Bragg on a Friday afternoon, bringing with her a care package of homemade food and a lifetime of wisdom about perseverance in the face of adversity. She was shocked by how drawn and tired Sarah looked, but she was also proud of how her daughter was handling the situation with dignity and grace. "Mija, you look terrible," Maria said with typical maternal directness. "But you're still standing, and that's what matters. Your father would be proud of how you're facing this challenge." That weekend, Sarah and her mother talked extensively about the situation and its broader implications. Maria helped Sarah understand that the controversy was about more than just her tattoo. It was about deeply held beliefs regarding military tradition, gender roles, and the meaning of honor and respect in military culture. "Some of these men are not really angry about your tattoo," Maria observed. "They're angry about changes in the military that they don't understand or accept. You're just an easy target for their frustration." Sarah knew her mother was right, but understanding the underlying dynamics didn't make the situation any less painful or challenging. She was still facing questions about her integrity and judgment, and the resolution of the investigation would determine whether she could continue serving effectively or whether the controversy would permanently damage her career. As her mother prepared to return to Texas, Sarah felt both grateful for the support and anxious about facing the final stages of the investigation alone. Major Coleman had indicated that her findings would be completed soon, and Sarah would finally learn whether she had been cleared of any wrongdoing or